We're at 100. Let's go. Nothing better to do on a nice Wednesday evening than talk product management. Excited to be here. Thank you all for joining us. We have an awesome lineup of panelists here, so very excited to jump in. Make sure you sign up for Leland if you haven't already. We've dropped the link in the chat. We do events like this and send out free resources and other things all the time, so just helpful to stay in the loop. All right, in terms of logistics, feel free to drop questions in the chat. I have a bunch of questions I'm gonna ask our panelists, but you're probably gonna have follow-up questions and we will try our best to monitor the chat. Can't always get to everything, but we do our best. Be respectful and supportive, of course, this is obvious, but these processes are stressful and they're exciting. And so it's nice to be supportive of each other. Make sure you sign up for Leland and find your coach. Let us know if we can help you. These processes are so competitive and we build Leland for this purpose to help you. And we do lots of free stuff like this, but of course there's so much more that we can't always get to in just an event like this. So let us know if you have questions. The agenda we have today, I'm going to do just quick welcome and introductions, just explain what Leland is really quickly. And then we're going to go into most of this will be focused on the panel, getting all the insights from Nina, Joseph, and Neha, and then we'll wrap things up right at the hour. And if you have any other questions, feel free to join our Slack community, and you can drop questions in there, and we can respond in there. All right, so quick introductions. I'm John. I'm the CEO of Leland. I'm also a product manager by background. So I worked at Uber and LinkedIn as a product manager, and then a startup called Curated. So I love building products. And feel very lucky. Honestly, I didn't know anything about product management as an undergrad. Feel very lucky that I was able to stumble into it. So that's my background. You'll also see Erica and Andrew in the chat and in follow-up emails. They're great. They run these things and make them go smoothly. So big shout out to them for their hard work. Now let's hear from our panelists. I'll let Nina, Joseph, and Neha introduce themselves, but just feel really lucky to have them here. They're experts on a lot of this stuff and all come with very different perspectives. So excited to hear from them. Nina, I'll kick it over to you, and then Joseph and Neha can go after Joseph.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Hey guys, I'm Nina. I'm a PM at Masterclass and have been focused on consumer engagement and growth in the last 2 years. I started my career in consulting and then pivoted to tech to do prod ops at Instagram. And I really wanted to be a PM for a while. I think it took me about 2 years to make the transfer. And during this time, I spent a lot of time reading articles, networking, and really learning strategies to crack the PM interview process. So I'm super excited about Leland and have enjoyed the opportunity to help people narrow down what type of PM roles they want to target, tailor their resume, and crush the interview, and kind of pay it forward to the next generation of PMs. I'll pass to Joseph.
Thanks. Hey everyone, I'm Joseph. I'm currently an APM at Google, working on YouTube. It's Associate Product Manager, so it's a 2-year rotational program where you work on one product, and then the next year you work on another product. So I'm in my first rotation of that, which means I have less than 3 years of experience. That's a requirement for getting into one of these rotational programs. And yeah, I went to University of Michigan. Didn't really know much about product management during college, like John, but then went into marketing at first, did a few side projects. And when I first got my first role in tech, it was actually in business operations. And that's when I started realizing there's actually a lot of business roles, including product management in tech. So I started this media company and mentorship program called TechPod. So we've just been helping students and young professionals get jobs in the tech industry, especially product management. So yeah, excited to get into that and APM experience and everything else.
All right, I think I'm up. Hi, everyone. Thanks for dialing in to the Zoom session. Really excited to meet all of you and be chatting with everyone. I have been coaching with Leland for a while now, I think since the early days. And I think I was there since day one of them opening up the product management vertical. So I've worked with quite a few clients at this point and have also taught specific classes or even series of classes on breaking into product management, nailing the PM interview, that kind of thing. I was also a consultant, so similar to Nina, and then switched to Facebook, where I was a rotational product manager in their cohort for more experienced hires. So this is for people who are not straight out of undergrad, who have work experience, but don't have significant full-time product experience. And then transitioned out of that program and continued on at Facebook on the Facebook side, and then later on the WhatsApp side. So yeah, I've really, really enjoyed my time at Leland and love working with clients.
Love it. Thank you all. Great. Let's get into it. So we also love to get to know whoever is, you guys have already started this. That's how great this community already is. We have California, Nigeria, Tokyo, but please drop in the chat. Where are you attending college, working, both the place and the location, because it's fun to hear where everyone is around the world. We have Tokyo, we have New York. So we have people into tomorrow already. And then what's your current favorite product? Would love to hear as kind of your sample product interview case study. We got Berkeley, Mumbai, Kentucky. Let's hear some favorite products here, huh? Don't be shy. DoorDash, DashPass, LinkedIn, Uber. Appreciate the LinkedIn shout out as someone that worked at LinkedIn, and frankly, LinkedIn gets a lot of hate. So we'll keep going though. This is great. Spotify, Airbnb, love it. Okay, I'm just gonna do a quick overview of what Leland is. You're probably wondering, we're a marketplace with amazing coaches like this that represent really all of the top companies and schools in the world, several hundred active education and career coaches. We've raised $5 million from top venture capital funds, have tens of thousands of members in our communities. So, we're pretty new, a year and a half into this, but we're growing really quickly, and hopefully expect to see a lot more of us, a lot more of these events and other things that we're doing. Just to kind of give you a quick overview of the types of things we do, Neha alluded to this, but we do one-on-one coaching, which is kind of our primary bread and butter. We feel like the personalization that you get from one-on-one coaching is just so valuable. And of course, there's things like this and content and other stuff that we can do at scale that's kind of helpful starting point. But the one-on-one coaching really helps you hone your skills, figure out your path, your target companies, and make sure that you actually succeed. We do small group classes. Neha runs a really popular breaking into product group class. And then we have, the Slack community that I've alluded to. So lots of different things trying to help you with where you're at. One of the things we are just kind of getting going that's been really valuable are these standardized one-on-one coaching packages. And we're actually doing a promotion just for the next 24 hours for this group. So typically, when you kind of approach the product management process, you have pre-interview. So how do I even get in the door? How do I network? How do I build a company list? How do I kind of figure out where I'm at, build the skills necessary? Then the next step would be, how do I actually nail the interview and make sure that I've tackled behavioral interviews, product case interviews, design, technical, other things that may come up. So I'll drop this. We'll drop links to this in the chat. But just to kind of give you a sense for like what you could expect. I'll share my screen here. So when you come to Leland, you'll see, I'll show you just kind of the homepage. You'll see here, you can type in product management and get going. Once you hit that site, you'll come to a page that looks like this. You can browse all sorts of different coaching packages like we talked about. You can see some of the classes that I've mentioned. This is Neha's class. We haven't scheduled a new session just yet, but you can get notified when we do that. If you're interested in these standardized packages, you can click here and that opens up some of these packages. So take a look. I feel like this is the most robust. We basically channeled all of our knowledge into what makes it possible to land a PM interview, what makes it possible to crush the PM interview, and then how do you do that start to finish? Check these out. We're going to revert the price back to what they normally are, starting in 2 days. So by tomorrow, if you're interested, you have to sign up to get that lower price. So definitely encourage you to do that. Those are super valuable, and we really don't do discounts that often. So just wanted to call that out. All right, back to the panel. And feel free to ping us, let us know if you have any questions. Maybe Erica and Andrew, if you guys want to drop a link in the chat for them to schedule calls with us if they have questions about that package. I'm happy to chat with any of you, and I know Andrew and Erica are as well. Okay, Let's start off with kind of just the journey, because I think it's different for everyone. We have, as was kind of mentioned before, we have some career pivoters, we have some APMs and Joseph. Maybe to start with Nina, I'm curious if you could just kind of talk about what were the steps that you took to just land your job in product management. It feels so competitive and kind of difficult. How did you think about it? What was your process like?
Yeah, of course. So I mentioned I started my career in consulting, and I think I knew at the end of my first 2 years in consulting that I wanted to become a PM, but it's really hard, as John alluded, to become a PM without tech or kind of product management experience. So I opted for an adjacent product role in product ops, which mostly exists in really large companies, FANG companies. So I kind of eliminated startups for my targeting. And with products, what's cool is you get to work directly with product teams. So in my case, I got to work with IGTV and Reels at Instagram, and I got to own more operational and kind of execution related items on the roadmap. So things around like improving our recommendations, ranking quality, things like that. And within 3 months of being on IGTV, I knew I for sure wanted to be a PM. So I reached out to the PM on my team and my manager and started asking, like, how can I make this happen? And there were 3 kind of big things that helped me. The first was really networking within the company to learn more about the PM role and being able to actually ask people to shadow and see what their day-to-day was like. And once I had shadowed them, I felt comfortable actually asking to take on aspects of their role. So if I wanted to lead a product review or kind of an aspect of a product discussion, I would be able to do so. The next thing I found was preparing for the interview loops is really key, and getting kind of hard feedback from people who've been through the process, especially the company you're targeting. So what I found is if I could pass the PM loop at Meta, probably that bar was pretty high and I could pass it at other companies. So I really found that network of PMs at Meta who believed in me and wanted to coach me, and then use that to prep a lot for the product sense, product execution, and behavioral interview loops. So with that, I then applied externally as well as internally to the RPM process. And kind of my first mistake was only applying internally to RPM, and I didn't get it. But then the second year, I ended up applying externally as well as internally. And having kind of gone through those interview steps and feeling really confident about the practice loops I had done, I was able to get offers at Pinterest, Spotify, Masterclass, and ultimately decided that I loved the mission of democratizing access to education to everyone, and wanted to be at a smaller company and kind of help build the future of online learning around like a social community. So that drew me to Masterclass. But yeah, in general, I think you got to be super persistent, keep networking, and it's really about doing those mock interviews to make yourself feel confident for your first interview.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I think the piece around like finding a champion or reaching out to people that are in product and really kind of getting them to weigh in or help you think through the application process, that resonates for me. When I was transitioning into product, I felt like I just relied so heavily on some senior people that would vouch for me that were in product. So that type of thing makes a lot of sense. And then of course, a lot of prep. Maybe just to transition over to Neha, and then Joseph, we'll go to you. Neha, what was your transition process like, going from, especially, consulting, very different world.
Yeah.
I know the RPM program is built for this, but like, what was that like? Any recommendations there?
It was tough. It was tough. So I'd always had an interest in tech, and in college I'd interned at LinkedIn and then at Google. And at Google, it's such an engineering driven company, and they had at that time a very, very strict technical requirement for product managers. Yeah. And I almost just like took myself out of the race. I just said, it's not for me. I'm going to be like this business person, so I should go to a business company. And so I joined BCG, but even there, I was doing things in the tech world because that was what was interesting to me. So I became a certified Scrum Master. I was embedded in teams at clients, like trying to help them develop mobile products. I worked on a cloud strategy project. So it was still sort of tech adjacent. I think, being in the Bay Area, I was at BCG San Francisco office. A lot of things were related to tech. And I knew that I could do it. The really, really difficult part of making the transition was convincing other people that I could do it. There is this concept of like a false positive, or it's like very costly for them to hire someone who can't actually do the job. And so they try to be very stringent. And so I spoke to a lot of my friends who were product managers, especially ones who had done it from consulting backgrounds, to try and understand how they had positioned their previous experience to demonstrate to companies that they had, what it takes. Similar to Nina, I started out with a lot of startups. And what I discovered was that they are pretty risk averse and really need someone who's done it before. So my avenue at startups would have been an indirect route, which I saw many people do, which is to start. I was kind of weighing like, should I go into an adjacent role like strategy and ops, and then try and work my way into product? But I really just wanted to make that switch directly. So I ended up zeroing in on FAANG companies, many of whom have specific programs for people who are experienced but don't have PM experience. And Facebook RPM ended up working out. Similar to Nina, I think the drilling for the interview was like a really, really important part of my process. And as soon as I found out I had the RPM interview, I was doing at least one interview every single night leading up to my interview. I think I probably did about 40 live mock interviews before my very first round interview. And I think that was a really important component in my success in getting through.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you, Neha. Joseph, let's hear about the APM program out of college. I know we have some college students. Curious what that process was like.
Yeah, for sure. So I actually started out in my first year out of college in Google's other program called APMM. So one more M, which means Associate Product Marketing Manager. During college, I didn't really do any PM internships. I mostly did marketing related side projects and other like small startup internships. Plus one to what everyone else said, it's just a lot of practice. Once I got my interview at Google APM, I did tons of mock interviews, did a ton of studying. I would say one thing that made this interview process different than all of the ones that I did in college where I didn't land the offer is I thought a lot harder about like what makes me unique. I think to be honest, I had sort of a chip on my shoulder as I was applying this time. Because throughout college, I applied so many different times and didn't even get an interview sometimes. And then sometimes I would get the interview and then not move on. So it was like pretty frustrating throughout college. But I think this time around, I really focused on, I almost treated it like college applications for those of you who are in college. Like, you probably remember thinking about how to pitch yourself to make yourself seem like the best candidate for the job or best candidate to get into this college. And I really thought about, with the help of a lot of mentors and people who are in product management, like figuring out my personal pitch, kind of thinking about it in marketing terms, like who is your target market? What is your unique value proposition? And what are the things that make you differentiated compared to other candidates? So for example, some of those things for me were, I pitched myself actually as the politics guy during my interviews because I had done some political campaigns in the past, and I actually pitched that, hey, like this is a kind of a non-traditional background, but here's why people who work in politics are actually the best product managers, because you have to understand different kinds of stakeholders, diverse, markets. And so that was like one of the ways that I tried to stand out during my interview process this time. I think it also definitely helps to have big company experience when you're applying to PM roles. So being 1 year at Google already definitely helped as well. So plus one to what everyone said, definitely lots of practice and mocks, but also like thinking about the personal branding aspect, I think was really helpful for me.
Yeah, let's double click on that a little bit, Joseph. That was the next question I wanted to kind of drill in on. APM programs, obviously very competitive, a lot of people trying to get into them. You mentioned a couple tips, like, obviously just getting other internship experience, sometimes even from a big brand name, or even building your own personal brand. Is there anything else or anything more you'd say on those that to help people differentiate themselves, especially when they're, a student and don't have years of experience?
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, just to answer the question in the chat, A is associate product manager. It's a 2-year rotational program. So yeah, as a college student, there's only going to be a very small percentage of people who have, product management internships. During the interview process, there were these group calls where I could see all the other candidates. It was like a Q&A sessions where you could ask about the recruitment process. So I looked at all the participants in those Zoom calls, and I looked everyone up on LinkedIn. I made a little chart of, what is my competition, and I found like a few different archetypes. There's like the traditional candidate who's actually has like PM experience, maybe at smaller companies or just internships. The second biggest one that I saw was just software engineers who were, had who used their software engineering experience and had certain like product related things during those experiences. And then the third one was just generally like people who seem to be pretty smart. So people who come from a consulting or analyst background who are generally like pretty analytical and but don't have any official PM experience. And then the fourth one was wild card, and this is the one that I felt like I fell into. I didn't really have any of those things. I was not SWE. I didn't have PM. I didn't really do consulting. I kind of just did a lot of side projects during college, and I basically pitched. I think there's certain ways to. I'll give one tip. So in my interviews, when you're answering PM questions, I think it's helpful to remember that the interviewer is a human and they're grading you on these pretty like qualitative things in the rubric. And like one thing that I did is I actually just, when they asked me a question about, for example, a product design question, I would go through the regular framework just like everyone else does, but then I would insert little stories about, oh, by the way, like during this experience, when I did this a year ago, I encountered a similar situation. Here's how we approached it. So kind of like personalizing your answers actually really helped me to stand out in the interviews. I'm giving this as a tip because I think there's a traditional like advice of, yeah, do lots of mocks, like make sure you understand the skills that are required to be a PM. But yeah, I think being able to personalize your experiences on your resume to the questions, I think was really helpful for me.
Yeah, one thing I'd add on that. So I interviewed for APM roles at LinkedIn, and they really honed in a lot on what I had built in the past. They want builders because that's the job of a PM. They want people who are kind of biased towards just building things, and that could be side projects. It could be little companies. It could be nonprofits. It could be whatever. Like it could be a product. It could be anything. So when I was in college, I built a little baseball company, and I literally brought the baseball to the interview, and I gave it to the head of product at LinkedIn in my interview because he had asked about it. And he's the CEO of LinkedIn, and he has this baseball on his desk still. So he like kept this physical product. And I think that there's like little artifacts or things that you can do to kind of make your experience really tangible in your interviewer's mind. I think it's a great point. Thanks, Joseph. Okay, let's move on to to Nina and Neha's experience. You've talked about this a little bit, but I'm curious, just like from a process standpoint or any other tips to really standing out in this type of transition. I think we have a lot of people that probably didn't know about product, found out about it a little bit later, or a few years into their career, and now are like, okay, how do I draw my line from where I am to, do I need to like take a role near to product, adjacent to product, and then go in? Like, what's the path? How do you think about that? What do you recommend to your clients? Maybe we'll start with Neha on this one, and then go to Nina.
Yeah, so I think first decide if you're okay going with an indirect path versus a direct path. So I think that's the first decision you want to make. So direct path would be you switch directly in. So say you go directly into a product management role. And the indirect path is you're willing to do something as an in-between step. So that is maybe grad school or business school. That is maybe working in a role like strategy and ops at a tech company. That's maybe joining a high growing startup where you do kind of any role, but then eventually you switch into product. So those are, broadly speaking, your two options. You have to decide which one you want. I think whichever path you decide, there are still some things that you can do in the present as a consultant to set yourself up for success. So I think the first thing I do is tap into your alumni network. So the nice thing about consulting is they have these big alumni databases, and a lot of alumni have gone on to product roles. So I think connecting with them, they, in my experience, tend to be the most kind of empathetic because they've been in your shoes before. And they know that you can do the job because they also made that switch and are doing that job. So they're more likely to take a chance on you. Like very tactically speaking, the two ways I've seen it done directly with clients are either they switch into a program like an RPM, or they have someone who takes a chance on them and decides to hire them directly into their team. So that's someone they have a relationship with from, say, a previous like case or engagement, or a previous manager, or someone they were able to connect with, like an alum or something who's a product manager who says, okay, come join my team at Apple. The other thing you can do is try and like wiggle your way into something that's easier to sell. So if you are working only with like retail clients, that's kind of difficult. So try and get on a tech case if you can. A lot of consulting companies also have these like digital initiatives now, or they're becoming much more digitally focused to help support clients. So there are even opportunities to be on cases where you can work with engineers internally to build tools like for the consulting firm itself or for the consulting firm's clients. So try and look into those as well to like build your list of experiences a little bit would be the two tactical things. The other tactical thing is applying with referrals. So the most difficult part, especially when you're going directly from consulting to product management, is getting the interview. I think that consulting interviews actually have a lot of parallels to product management interviews. So I typically find that people do all right, or once they get to that phase, the really difficult part is getting the interview.
Yeah, totally agree. Nina, would love your thoughts. Anything else you'd add?
Yeah, a few more things, plus one to a lot of what Neha said. I think another thing that was really helpful is to make a list of target companies you want to target being a PM for. So say if you're working in retail now, maybe like e-commerce or something that's more translatable to what you're trying to do, or if you have experience within growth or consumer, like trying to focus on that. So just pitching any way you can, like why, going kind of back to what Joseph was saying, your story and your experience is really kind of fits for this role and may not be what they traditionally think is a right fit, but you can kind of convince them based off of your previous experience. Another kind of tactical thing I think you can do is think about like, what are the skill sets that you apply in your job that are the core skill sets needed for a PM? So something like being scrappy in ops is pretty common. So just finding a way to get things done when there's not enough resources, not enough time. And that's something as a PM you'll often have to do. So kind of changing the lens around that of how do you get things done when you face resource constraints or engineers pushback, and just trying to apply those lessons you've learned in your ops or marketing or whatever role you're previously coming from. Another thing is to think about like the skills that you may not have in terms of cross-functional collaboration. So for instance, I knew I didn't have any experience working with designers. And so I would be proactive about sharing that, knowing that that's something that's important to PM roles, but then provide a kind of way that I'm trying to improve that. So something I'm doing is taking an online class about UI and design to better understand how to be a better partner to future design coworkers when I'm a PM. So really showing that initiative and how you're very self-aware of your strengths and your weaknesses, but trying to tackle them head on. And then the last thing I would say is updating your resume with specific PM language and skill sets, because at the end of the day, recruiters and AI, they're filtering for certain things. And so it really helps, I think, as John had mentioned in the chat, to land your foot in the door if you have the right terminology. And a lot of this is just framing, like you probably have the experience, whether it's a side project from school or a group project, some volunteer work you've done, and just thinking about how you tee it up in a way that it's easy for someone to draw the connection of how this skill set you've gained or this experience will work in that PM role. So things like road mapping or user research, customer interviews you've done, and then making sure the impact you've had on a product, company, organization is super clear and very easy for like your grandma to understand. So I think things like that really help make sure you get your foot in the door.
Yeah, that's super valuable. And actually is like the perfect segue into what we wanted to talk about next, which is skills that you need to learn in order to be competitive. I loved your point around figuring out what your strengths are and really leaning into those. It seems to me, we get a lot of questions like, oh, do I need to have a technical background? Do I need to have a design background? Do I need to, do I need X in order to get the job as a PM? And the reality is like PMs are going to spike on certain things, and you're not going to get the job for being like perfect in every area. You're going to get the job because you're like world class in one or two, and you kind of understand some of the other skill sets. So, but I'd be curious. I think it, obviously depends on the company and the role. I'd be curious to get some additional thoughts. Maybe Joseph, we go to you, and then Neha. What are some of these important skills? How do you develop them or communicate them? I think technical background being one of those that people think a lot about.
Yeah, for sure. I really resonate with what you said about leaning into your strengths, like really pitching yourself as world class in one or two things, and then also thinking about your weaknesses, but not necessarily pitching them as your main points, but just mitigating them. So for me, that mitigation was not being a computer science major. I majored in econ, and I did some CS classes. So in my interviews, I made sure to let them know that, hey, I did these CS classes. I did data structures and algorithms, learn C++, Python, SQL, use all these like buzzwords to really give the impression that, hey, I actually am somewhat technical, even though I'm not a CS major. And then that was just, a thing that I said, I made sure to say as a checklist. But then as my main pitch, I didn't really talk that much about that. I mostly talked about the side projects and the startup-y stuff that I did in the past. But yeah, I mean, I think, +1 to what everyone has said about speaking the language of a PM on your resume, prioritization, stakeholder management, product sense, execution, like product design skills, like these are all kind of like product management specific skills. If you haven't done those specifically, you can still describe them that way, because at the end of the day, they're just communication and analytical skills. They kind of all fall into those buckets. So if you can, as long as you feel confident that you have those skills, like good communication skills, good analytical skills, you can describe your experiences in those terms. So, I mean, like John said, any skill, design, technical, business, is important for being a PM, but I would say it doesn't really matter which one you choose. It's kind of just be really good at something, and then be able to translate that language-wise into these PM specific language. And then specifically for technical, I think it's just always good to show that you're somewhat technical if you are. So yeah, it varies by company how technical they want their product managers, but I would say it can never hurt to to fully pitch like how technical you are. If you've done, for example, just like a scripting project in the past, make sure to talk about that. Don't like gloss over that. I think the more technical, the better.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Neha, I'm curious, yeah, if you have anything else to add, perhaps even like kind of addressing the point of what if I don't have these skills? Like, it's not like a lot of us spend our nights and weekends build. I mean, a lot of us do, but a lot of people don't have that UI. Like, but a lot of people have never used Figma before, never used it, never built things. Like, what do you do? Or in a role that is very different. Curious if you have any thoughts.
I think you can abstract up a lot the job. So it's not about UI, it's not about data science, it's not about Python. Like at its most basic level, like a product manager has to get people to work together and get something done or get to some kind of an outcome. And I think when you phrase it like that, then it becomes something much more relatable. And I think probably like many of us on this call have done something like that. So think about what you've done that falls in that bucket and try and pitch it to the best of your ability. So that time where you rallied together a bunch of people on your team because you really thought that we needed to go ahead with like this specific strategy, or you didn't agree with the direction that, was originally proposed, and you were able to convince everyone to take on that new direction. Well, like, guess what? That's totally like a PM skill, and you should be talking about it. So I think it's fine if you don't have the nitty gritty, as long as you understand that like the crux of the job is what you kind of enable your team to deliver. And by highlighting that in your work experience, which I think almost everyone does have to some degree, it makes the switch a lot less intimidating. In terms of the technical background, I think I used to say like, no, you don't need it. I think it really is an advantage. Like, that's just the truth. If you studied computer science, like, I think you have an easier time than someone who hasn't studied something in that field. That said, it's definitely possible to break in without it. I think we're like all a testament to that fact. And you just have to think a little bit more about what the interviewer might be thinking of you, and then try to address those gaps. So say if you're someone who studied computer science or you were a software engineer, well, you're the recruiter, the hiring manager might be wondering, okay, but can this person communicate well? Can this person collaborate well? Can this person be persuasive? All of those things, like for someone who doesn't have the technical background, maybe they can lean into those other qualities which they may have demonstrated, and then to what Joseph said, try and address any like perceived weaknesses as best as you can by talking about anything like remotely technical, or any conversation with engineers you may have had.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of the technical stuff is really in terms of like, can you speak the language? Can you understand the building blocks of like, what is front end? What is back end? Like, what are the different things? Can you prioritize product features because you understand the scope and how heavy something's going to be, or how big of a lift it's going to be? Some of those things are actually pretty important. And so, yeah, to your point, I think you can abstract up everything, and whether that's you're trying to get people to do things, or you are just trying to be a really empathetic product manager that really understands deeply what your users' pain points are, or at LinkedIn, one of the things they cared a lot about was, are you an ecosystem thinker? Because LinkedIn is a single product with all of these products built on top of it. And so if you don't understand how the whole ecosystem fits together, then it's really hard for you to make product trade-offs. So different companies kind of care about different things. Yeah, love those insights. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so let's talk about some of these like get your foot in the door types of tactics. I know a lot of people on this call are thinking, I could be a pretty good product manager. Like, I've built things before, but like I apply to these jobs and I just don't hear back, or what do I do? I'm curious, yeah, what are some of these things outside of maybe some of the tactics we talked about? Like, if you're at a company, building relationships with the product people, or getting a job that is adjacent to those. Are there any other things that you guys would recommend doing to get your foot in the door, to build out your resume and put yourself in a position to succeed? Maybe we go to Nina for this one.
Yeah, I think outside of the things we've talked about, there's a few others that come to mind. First is hackathons. So your company might already have something like that. If not, you should pitch it. It's a great opportunity to push for innovative thinking. You know your company super well and like what the problems your current company's users face, and can be kind of creative and maybe get funding to actually build out an idea and become a pseudo PM without actually having to have the formal title. So for that, you'd be able to pitch some user problem, become the PM and founder who's rallying a team around solving this user problem, and then securing kind of the budget to actually execute on the solution you guys come up with. The second thing that comes to mind would be online courses. I usually am skeptical of these. I feel like they're just trying to take your money. And it's hard to absorb this information online, but there's two that I've come across that I really enjoy, and actually all the PMs at my company Masterclass take, and that's Maven and RefForge. So these have industry experts who are providing actual case studies from their experience, and it goes everything from data to working with user research insights to just becoming a better product manager. So it's more tactical things about once you're actually in the role, but I think a lot of those skill sets you could apply to your current job or current school projects, and then be able to kind of craft a narrative or story to put in your resume or behavioral interviews that will resonate with the hiring managers. And then the last thing I would say is try to attend industry meetups or conferences. Networking is super key. And in this, you'll be able to meet experienced PMs, learn about recent trends, best practices, emerging technologies, and kind of throw those into your narrative so you speak that product talk and they think you have this drive really in the product world and are kind of motivated to keep continuously learning, which is a huge plus for a lot of recruiters. And some examples of groups that come to mind is Women in Product is a super strong Facebook group. They do in-person meetups, and people are always sharing resume advice. And then the Product School is also another one that does conferences. They have a newsletter. And so that's another kind of great way to stay up to date and learn about what's going on.
Love it. Super helpful. Thank you. Joseph, maybe we'll get your thoughts too on this before we kind of move on to the next question. I know you've talked about it a little bit, and there's also a question in the chat, but yeah, curious if you have any thoughts on building out your resume, getting in the door.
Yeah. Nina's list of things were really great. I would say I would just add maybe two more things. One of them is building side projects. So yeah, like basically if you're in college and you have and there exists a computer science major, that means there's lots of people around you who are learning how to code, and they're probably willing to, they want to get software engineering internships. So how do you make a software team? Like, what does a software team at Google or one of these tech companies look like? There's a PM, there's designers, there's engineers. So there's probably people at your school who want those roles. So one thing that I did when I was in college is I talked to my friends who were CS majors. I talked to my friends who were in trying to go into product design. And then I just got them together and said, hey, here's an app idea I have. Let's build it. And then I I self-taught a little bit of programming, not too much, just kind of the basics of how to talk about these programming languages and how they work together. And then we just built an app. And that was one of the core things that I talked about in my interviews. I put it on my resume and just put the title product manager, because that's what I did for that experience. And yeah, so I think side projects is definitely one thing. And then the other thing specifically for college students is if there's a product management club at your school, definitely do that. I think that's one of the best ways to just learn PM language. If you just surround yourself with people who are also trying to recruit for product management, you're just going to start speaking the language of PM. If you go to these meetings every week and just start talking about PM. So join a PM club. If there isn't a PM club, then just start one. UMich is a huge school and their PM club only started like 2 years ago, like my senior year. So yeah, their PM clubs I think are very new, kind of a new concept on college campuses. At least the ones that I've seen. So yeah, you could be the one to start a PM club on your campus, and it doesn't have to be super serious. You can just learn about PM, and it can be a starting place for people to learn more about it and network, host events like this, like Leland, like invite PMs. If any of you in the audience right now wants to start a PM club, I will happily be a guest speaker at your first event. So yeah, joining clubs, starting clubs, and side projects.
Love it. There you have it. You have your first speaker and your second, third, and fourth here. Yeah, it's a great idea. I feel like PM is still kind of relatively new, and college campuses are great at more traditional paths, and maybe less so with some of the newer paths. So it takes some hustle, and it's really helpful to kind of band together. Okay, let's keep going. We only have a couple of questions left, so bear with us. We're almost done. Lots of amazing insights so far. Thank you. Okay, Neha, maybe over to you. This is a tough question because there's a lot to unpack with interviews. But how would you think about preparing to really crush your PM interviews?
I think live practice is really the key. There is nothing comparable in my experience to having someone on Zoom ask you, how would you build a product for people to find apartments? And you're just like frozen and you don't know what to say. You don't know where to start. And I think until you put yourself in that position over and over and over again, it's really difficult to build fluency and structure into how you answer that. So live practice is like really, really the number one thing. I think the like frameworks and all of that, like really a lot of it can just come through practice and you building your own pattern recognition of what you hear over and over. Don't be picky with practice partners. Like anyone who will practice with you, PM or not a PM, like just go for it. And there are a ton of resources for people to match with practice partners online. Like if you want to reach out to me on Leland after, I can help like point you to a few. They are really useful. A lot of the times it'll be people applying for like similar programs as you. You can match very granularly to expected experience level. And you can work with coaches. So I think there are a lot of paid and unpaid options for practice. But I mean, the one thing I really want to like emphasize is, like 5 hours reading a book is not going to be as valuable as one mock interview. So, like, please don't spend tons of time reading blog after blog after blog. Like, just put yourself in the ring. It's going to really suck the first few times, but I promise you'll get better. And like, that is the way.
Yeah, I found that I felt like when I was first prepping, I found myself like trying to memorize these frameworks. And I think it was maybe because I just I'd never done it before. And so that was like my best chance of like guessing the structure. But the reality is all product cases is an exercise in problem solving, and frameworks are just kind of tools to help you problem solve. And so the more practice you get trying to just actually solve problems and maybe applying a few different frameworks or ideas or pulling things that kind of help you solve them, the better off you'll be. To the questions in the chat, yes, there's like tons of that is all of these coaches offer live mocks. So definitely encourage you to do that with them. And they can do stuff where you work on just getting in the door, and then once you get in the door, you can go deep into preparing for interviews. Okay, let's move on here. What are some of the common mistakes that candidates make during the recruiting process? How can they be avoided? I think a lot of people on this call maybe feel like they're kind of hitting a wall. They don't know what they're doing wrong. And sometimes it's not that they're doing anything wrong, but just curious if there's any common mistakes. And I'll just open this up to any of you three, if there's any common mistakes that come to mind.
One thing that comes to mind for me is it can be scary if you haven't done a bunch of interviews recently and you are trying an interview for a brand new role like PM that you haven't done. But really don't be afraid to take a moment and gather your thoughts if you're asked a question, whether it's behavioral or product sense or kind of execution type question. And just, I think the interviewers prefer if your response is structured and very thoughtful than you answering right away. So you want to make sure you can communicate how you're thinking, kind of tee up, like I'm going to go through these 3 points and then summarize your answer. And then if it's anything with design, being able to like walk them through how you're envisioning a product or a feature and trying to show a whiteboard or a handwritten drawing or anything like that. because I really think it's the structure and communication that can be stressful when you have nerves, but you just need to take a moment and breathe and not let the pressure get to you.
That's great. Anything else, Neha or Joseph, you'd add?
Yeah, I think I'd add like don't spin your wheels for too long. So if you're finding that you're not getting traction with your current approach, then consider getting a little bit of help. Like even 20 minutes of a coach's time could be really transformational in like your results. I think doing the same thing over and over, if for what, like there are a lot of clients I work with, and they've tried for so long to make that pivot. I think like many of us on this call like wanted to be a product manager far before the time we actually became product managers. And I think getting help, like getting a set of eyes on your resume can really help you, with your blind spots, and can really be like a step change unlock for your results.
Yeah, one more quick thing about resumes. In college, since I did so many side projects, I probably had like 8 or 9 things to choose from to put on my resume. And I don't think I was like, personally, I don't think I was selective enough in choosing what things are actually the most relevant to PM. Because in my mind, I was thinking there's this thing that I did, and emotionally it feels like this was super impactful and it actually contributed a lot to who I am today, but maybe it doesn't sound that good. There's no way to make it sound that good for like a PM role. And a lot of the people I've helped get roles in PM do the same thing. They just list out all their experiences, even the ones that are not really relevant. And it's so hard to let go of some of those things. But there's like a lot of times there's like drastic changes that need to be made to resumes, just because there's a lot of these experiences that are really hard to let go of.
Yeah, that's great. Okay. Final question. I know this is extremely broad. We've covered a lot of ground here. Any last advice for audience members that are trying to pursue PM? Maybe we'll go Neha. Let's go Nina, Joseph, and then Neha to finish us out. Nina, why don't you take it away?
I got this advice from a PM sponsor, and it's identify your PM superpower and be able to pitch that into your 1-minute intro about yourself. So if it's that you have a bias to action, you get things done, include that, and then that'll really stick with them, and they'll kind of be waiting to hear that theme throughout your behavioral stories. But yeah, make sure you're selling yourself in early and often with that superpower that the team will be looking for.
Joseph, what do you got for us?
I actually was going to say very similar. Just balance yourself out, understand your strengths and weaknesses. Definitely talk to people who are in product management and have them, maybe one of us book a coaching call, figure out what those strengths and weaknesses are, and really nail your why this company, why PM answers, and really nail like just your entire persona of how you're going into these interviews.
Okay, Neha, bring us home.
Yeah, I know it's really difficult when you're trying to make a switch and it's not going the way you thought, but there is definitely hope and you can definitely do it. So I think have like courage in yourself and don't be worried if it's taking longer than you thought. Also, make sure that it's a role that you are taking for the right reasons. Like I see a lot of people who like really, really want to become product managers, but when I dig a little bit deeper, they don't really understand the role. And many people are attracted to it because they think they're going to be like the mini CEO, which you're not, and a bunch of other kind of misconceptions about a role that they perceive as like glamorous or desirable for whatever reason. And I think if you don't have that like knowledge of really wanting it, it's difficult to keep going through the tough times. And you may also end up in a role that you've chosen for the wrong reasons and then later not be happy with it.
Yeah, that's super helpful. There's always hope, and do the prep work. That's great. Thank you all for these amazing insights. yeah, I encourage you all to reach out to these coaches. They do book up. So encourage you to reach out to them. You can message them to do a free intro call, or to just book your first coaching session, get started. Thank you. Can everyone just throw some love in the chat for these people and all the great insights they shared? Super helpful. Thank you for taking time out of your Wednesday evening. It's been great being with all of you. Thank you for coming from all over the world. And I know a lot of you are going to be watching this recording, so thank you for joining. These are some of the fun moments that remind us that we're not doing this alone. And it's these are stressful, exciting, nerve-wracking, and super rewarding processes. So thanks to these panelists. Make sure you sign up for the free Leland account, access the free guides and resources. As I mentioned, we have the next 24 hours. You can book that kind of standardized package and work with some of these coaches. So encourage you to do that, encourage you to look at all the different things that we offer, and join us for future events, because we do these often, and would love to have you join us. So thank you all for joining, and yeah, we'll let you go from here. Thanks again, panelists.